Hey, what's up guys? So in one of my videos that I posted the other day, I talked about the issues that can arise when you're running two detectors side by side during radar detector testing. Namely, they're going to interfere with one another and they'll cause all sorts of problems, including reduced range, missed alerts, increased false alerts, etc. And so if you're doing radar detector testing, you don't want to run two detectors at the same time because they're going to cause problems with each other and mess up your results. Now, that said, there's actually some things that you can do to reduce the risks of interference, and there may be reasons why you actually may want to run two radar detectors at the same time, and there's some people who do this. Now, this is kind of an advanced topic. Even if you do these things to reduce the interference, you're still going to have problems, which is why I say don't do this during testing, but there may be reasons and some benefits that could outweigh some of the risks, especially if you do some things to kind of reduce the chances of interference. So this is kind of an advanced topic. This is not anything I'm going to recommend that people do. There's no way to completely solve the interference, but this may be something that some people would want to do. So I kind of hesitate talking about this because I don't recommend doing bad things, especially things that can be detrimental to your performance. But let's talk about this nonetheless because, well, it's an advanced topic and let's have some fun. So running multiple radar detectors at the same time. Now, the classic example of people wanting to do this historically has been the Redline and the V1. The idea is the Redline has fantastic range, but it doesn't have great filtering on K-band and it doesn't have arrows. The V1 doesn't have the longest range ever, but it does have arrows and it's got better K-band filtering, and you can run YaVi1 and V1 driver and get lockouts and all that stuff, So what a lot of people would do is it would actually run both detectors at the same time. They would space the detectors out as far apart as possible, typically on opposite ends of the windshield, and then they'll have the Redline running at max performance to get the crazy long range alerts, and then the V1 would kick in shortly thereafter and let them know where the signal is coming from, and if it's a K-band alert, they'll have just the V1 running K-band duty. So that was something that people would do to kind of get the best of both worlds with long range performance and arrows. So that was something pretty cool. Now, okay, I mentioned spacing out the detectors. There was, I believe, an Escort engineer years ago. I wish I could find this thread. At this point, it's just kind of he said, she said. It's been passed down, but years ago there was, I think, an Escort engineer, and he was saying that if you spaced the detectors about 36 inches apart or so, it might be a little bit more or less, again, I don't remember the details, or even which detector he was talking about, but if you space the detectors about 36 inches apart, that will either reduce or eliminate, I don't think completely eliminate, but it'll reduce the interference in such a way where you really shouldn't have issues, and it should be safe to run the two detectors. Now, I wish I remembered what detectors he was talking about, because this will vary greatly from detector to detector. Some detectors are more leaky than others, so this isn't any sort of universal principle by any means. If you guys remember this post or this discussion where it was, if you could actually post it down in the comment area so I could post it in the video description and link to it, that would be awesome. But there was something said about how it was safe to actually do this. Now, people have tested this over the years, and they've actually found that these two detectors in particular do seem to play pretty well together, the V1 and the Redline. Now, this seems to be kind of unique to these two detectors. This is not a universal principle by any means. It's not like you can take any two detectors, just put them on opposite ends of the windshield, and it's going to be okay. So I'll actually talk about a couple different detector combinations that do and do not play well together in just a bit, but let's kind of talk a little bit more about the V1 and Redline. So how much interference is there? Well, it's kind of interesting the way the interference was arising. Hidden Cam and Rags actually did some testing with this years ago. I'll post the links in the video description to these tests. Basically, one of the tests that they did was they put the V1 and the Redline pretty close together to, be able to see the interference issues more easily. You space them farther apart, it'll reduce the interference, not eliminate them, but it'll reduce them. If you space them, or if you put them closer together, it's easier to just see what's going on, So he did a test with a V1 and a Redline pretty close together, and it was interesting what he saw. There was actually a regular pattern to some of the false alerts that were being generated by the Redline onto the V1. The V1 was falsing. I know people like to say, oh, the leaky V1 is going to false the Redline more, especially because the V1 is very detectable by the Spectre, and the Redline is not, but the false alerts actually happen in both directions. And in this particular test, it was being done where the Redline was falsing the V1. Anyways, the way the false alerts were arising, at first the falses were happening every 30 seconds or so, roughly. Then just kept watching and was finding that the false alerts were arising every 3 minutes or so. About every 3 minutes, the Redline would trigger a false alert on the V1, running KA guard off, I believe, to show the issues. Anyways, there seemed to be a regularity to the way the falses were arising, and that kind of makes me wonder, like, if you go out and you do long-range testing, and people have done this, you can run 2 detectors at a time and you see where they perform, and then you can run the detectors individually and you'll find they give you the exact same amount of range and distance. And you're like, well, I'm not seeing interference, I'm not seeing any false alerts, I'm not seeing any range reduction. These 2 detectors may be safe to run at the same time. But with this other test where we're seeing them go off every 3 minutes, what it seems to be the case is it's very possible that you'll only see this interference affect your detector's performance sometimes, but not always, which is what makes it kind of a pain in the butt to test and really say whether or not 2 detectors are working, because it's not consistent, it's not easily repeatable, and sometimes you'll see the issues and sometimes you won't. So there's always going to be some doubt and uncertainty, which is actually one of the big reasons why it's tough to say definitively that yes, 2 detectors play well together. Even detectors like the V1 and the Redline, where traditionally people are like, those are okay to work together, you'll see some issues. There's been tests done with M3s where the M3s can cause each other to false, or maybe the ramp ups will start to get a little bit weird, or they will misidentify frequencies because there's another M3 next to it. NPark on RDF actually just shared with me some testing he did with the Redline and a Magnum. Redline up high in the rearview mirror, Magnum down lower, was running against some radar sources and was finding with the 2 detectors running at the same time, you would get inconsistencies as far as the ramp up, or they would even display incorrect frequencies. And this is 2 M3s, which are stealthy detectors, and they are stealthy, but again, close up, you're going to start to find issues. So there's never a way to completely avoid the issues, but what if you want to do it anyways? Let's talk about some different combinations. Redline and V1, a lot of people like to do this, but you're going to see issues. I've seen issues where one detector will reduce the range in the other, or one detector will false the other, and again, due to the nature of interference itself, it's just tough to get definitive, conclusive, clear results because it's just kind of hit or miss. But with that said, let's talk about just kind of a couple different issues that I've seen, either myself or that other people have reported. I've got a list here on my phone. One thing that I've been playing with so far is the Uniden R3 and the Stinger VIP, just seeing which one offers better range, right? What about BSM filtering? BSM filtering can be really, really tough to definitively test. If we can find 2 detectors that play well, maybe you can see like, oh, one detector is alerting to this car, the other one is not. Is interference at play? Is one detector falsing the other? I have no idea. There's always going to be risks, you know? But I've been experimenting with this. That's been kind of interesting. I've been seeing the Stingers actually falsing more to BSMs than the Unidens in general. And I've talked about this in different posts. I'll post that on RDF if you want to see all that. And the Uniden was getting longer range, but interference is always a risk, and so that's kind of what I've been seeing running them together. I think they're playing pretty well together, but I can't say for sure because it's just the nature of interference. So that's kind of something that I've been experimenting with. I've also been experimenting, I know you guys have seen in some of my previous videos, front and rear radar detectors to see how well that works. A number of you guys have asked about that. Unfortunately, I don't see a ton of radar around here. I wish I saw more. I could post more videos and encounters and whatnot. But the issues that I were getting, I mean, were actually things where when I had a detector mounted right there, I couldn't put my top up and down, and the suction cup I was using was super, super strong, and when I was taking it down, it was kind of starting to seem like it might rip off my tint or something, you know? So I haven't bothered putting it back up, and it's kind of a pain to run the cables and have a second mute button, and I mean, it was kind of cool to be able to see it in the rearview mirror, you know? But I haven't found a ton of value to it. I know some people are actually experimenting with this. It's kind of one of the current discussions. You know, front detector, rear detector, ghetto arrows in a sense, or kind of makeshift arrows with 2 detectors. I don't know really anything conclusive about that, but that's just kind of something people are playing with. What are some things that I have seen specifically that I know for a fact have caused issues, and what are those issues? One thing that I've seen is running the Stinger in the V1. I've seen an interesting issue where I didn't notice this until testing, where I was doing K-band testing and I was turning TMF on and off on the V1. When I was turning TMF off on the V1, I was actually starting to see false alerts. I don't remember if it was on the V1 or the Stinger, but I noticed that I was actually getting false alerts. I think it was actually the V1 was falsing to the Stinger, which was kind of surprising to me when I had TMF turned off. But then when I turned TMF back on, suddenly the false alerts on K-band were going away on the V1, which I thought was kind of bizarre to see false alerts arising from the Stinger, which is otherwise an RDD immune detector too, you know? So weird things like that. I've seen the the R3 and the Magnum. I talked about this in my last video. Hidden Cam actually saw the two detectors. The R3 completely put the Magnum to sleep, drove all the way up to the radar gun with no alert from the Magnum. Then he unplugged the R3, plugged it back in to power cycle it. Boom, full tilt alert from the Magnum. So it can see, obviously, the signal, but something due to the nature of the interference was just causing the Magnum to choose not to alert at all until it was power cycled. So even though it could see the signal, the interference was just preventing it from choosing to do so, or from doing so, which is kind of weird. I don't understand exactly what's going on under the hood, but weird stuff like that happens. Another one. The Uniden R3 and the Radenso XP. The XP doesn't seem to play very well with other detectors, and I've noticed this actually with the Net Radar as well. I've got the Net Radar and the Stinger VIP. I tried running those two together. They're actually pretty close together on my grill, which is of course not good, but I was seeing issues where the Net Radar was causing 24/7 falses on the Stinger, and so I can't run the Net Radar and the Stinger at the same time because of those issues. Another thing that I've seen is the Me Is My Name has an LRD 950 on his windshield, and he's got a Radenso HD Plus out on his grill. And we're seeing issues where whenever he gets close to a wall or there's a car in front of him, it can reflect the signals coming out of the LRD 950 back into the HD Plus out on his grill, and he starts getting false alerts on KA band on his HD Plus coming from the LRD 950. So the alerts can be present if there's reflections, you know, coming back. The LRD 950, I've seen false alerts with that detector, and actually in other vehicles. I've seen it false to V1, I've seen it false on STIR Plus that were in a different vehicle, so those ones can false. The most notorious ones are the old Cobras. Those things cause false alerts like crazy in other radar detectors, and so, you know, driving nearby, you're going to need RDR on or KA guard or to segment your detector or KA filters or things to deal with these false alerts. So I'm kind of running through a lot of different detectors that don't play well together because this happens all the time. Typically, again, false alerts are going to be super common, but even if the detectors won't cause false alerts, you're going to see other things like reduced range or missed alerts, like I talked about with Hidden Cam's thing with the R3 and the Magnum getting put to sleep. So there's going to be all sorts of weird issues. I don't have a good, like, definitive, these two detectors are perfect and never ever cause issues. You know, some people have done things like putting two M3s in their car, a remote M3 on the grill, a rear M3 in the back. Those ones seem to play better together. They're pointed in opposite directions. They're both stealthy detectors. You get kind of your arrows in a sense, just see which M3 goes off first. So people have done that, and those seem to be playing better together, but that's kind of an extreme one. Not a lot of people do that, but people have done that and have reported good results. So two M3s, or I think so far the R3 and the Stinger, but I can't say for sure. I'm sure after I post this video I'm going to find a situation where, you know, I'm going to have to eat my words, and nope, of course it is, no surprise, an issue. But kind of the classic one that people have done are the Redline and the V1, and a lot of people have reported good results. I've had issues with that. I've done it before, so I don't do it anymore. One thing that people are wondering about a lot is the Uniden R3 and the V1. Kind of like the modern version of the Redline in the V1. How are the R3 and the V1? I don't know. There's a full thread on that on RDF. I'll link you to that in the video description as well. So that's one thing that I'm curious about. I don't have super high hopes. I'm gonna try testing it in my car. I have to, you know, run a second wire, kind of move my hard wires because I have it mounted by the rearview mirror, and I want to put them on opposite ends of the windshield. So I'm gonna experiment with that. Honestly, I would love this to work, which is kind of why I keep trying this, but test after test after test is showing that it's not bulletproof, reliable, and problem-free. But just as a tester and the endless curiosity, maybe I'm being dumb about it, I fully admit that, right? I just kind of want to keep trying it and see if I can find some magical solution where two detectors at the same time really does work without any problems. And I would love to see that, but I don't think that's the case. But for those of you guys who would like to try it and you're curious about kind of some of the risks, these are the things that people have been reporting. If you want to try it, you know, of course I'm going to sit here and say don't do it, but then here I am doing it. So it's kind of one of those do as I say, but not as I do. So it's an advanced thing. It's not without its problems and risks. The simple answer is don't do it. It's going to cause problems, and you can never be sure, you know, for sure that there's not going to be any sort of issues caused. But for those of you guys who want to dive more deeply into this running two detectors at the same time, These are some of the things that people have seen, that I have seen, and maybe some of the benefits and reasons why you may want to experiment with it and try it. So again, not a good idea, not recommended, but if you're wanting to experiment with it anyways for one reason or another, here's some information on just things people have expected, some detectors that do seem to work, and some that definitely do not. So anyways, if you guys have experimented with this, let me know kind of what your experiences have been. Again, it's really tough to find out for sure, yes, these two work well. I mean, you can run test after test to say, I get the same range with two detectors at the same time as I do when I run them individually, and I'm not seeing any false alerts. It's easy to show that there are problems. It's very difficult to show that there's not problems, especially with the fact that kind of what we saw with the V1 and red line, where we were getting the falses every 3 minutes or so. You may have just happened to be doing the testing in the situations where the interference wasn't aligned in such a way where it would impact the results. You know, it may just luck out to where you're doing the test at the times when the interference is not present. And that's kind of one of those things where you can drive 100,000 miles and it may happen and you would just not ever know, you know? So I wish I had something a little bit more conclusive to share with you. This is just kind of what I've been seeing so far, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I was sort of hesitant to share this, because there's not a conclusive, definitive result to this, and it's tough to say for sure that there's no impacts to performance, and we're kind of going in blind to this a little bit. So again, it's kind of an advanced topic, but just figured I'd go ahead and share this with you guys, since you know, I've been experimenting with this, and there are situations where maybe you'd want to try running two radar detectors at the same time in real world situations for yourself, despite the you know, no-nos when it comes to testing. So again, for testing purposes, definitely don't do it, but maybe you'll want to try it as an additional test and just see for yourself, how well do they perform? Does it impact results? Are you seeing, you know, negative results? Are you able to get from your testing, it looks like they do perform well? Again, tough to say for sure, tough to disprove, but just see what you see. You know, that's kind of how testing works. We just try stuff. So I guess that's about all I have to say. Let me know if you have any questions, I guess, or that's kind of the majority of the stuff. Most of the stuff has been discussed on RDF. There's tons of threads and discussion and blah, 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 and the results are always going to be, don't do it, never a good idea, blah, blah, blah. But some people will do it anyways because maybe we're thick-headed, or we're dumb, or we just want to experiment anyways, or we just hope for the best. And you know that quote about maybe insanity is trying the same thing many times and expecting different results, which apparently is not an Einstein quote. I heard it is. Whatever. I'll just end this video there. So that's running two detectors at the same time. Some people do it. I try it. Yeah. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful. I just kind of wanted to share why people do it, and pros and cons and risks and benefits and blah, blah, blah. So I'll see you guys in the next video.